Northampton and Little Boar's Head are preparing for the impacts of a changing climate. Why is this important? Let's take a look at what's at risk. The beach and the recreational opportunities it provides for local residents and visitors. Historic resources like the fish houses in the town's agricultural heritage. Houses for permanent and seasonal residents alike. Critical infrastructure like roads, public buildings, and drinking water, stormwater, and wastewater infrastructure. Natural resources like salt marshes, freshwater wetlands, and forests, and the wildlife habitat and other benefits they provide. And local businesses and the economy. Both the Northampton and Little Boar's Head master plans identify the importance of protecting community character, heritage, and natural resources. Climate change adds an additional layer to consider ways to protect the community and its resources into the future. In the past, Northampton and Little Boar's Head have been affected by storms, flooding, and drought, and these impacts are projected to increase into the future due to climate change. So let's take a look at what impacts you could expect. Being on Northampton's coast, Little Boar's Head bears the brunt of the immediate coastal impacts from climate change. This includes more frequent and intense storms causing coastal flooding, damaging infrastructure, and affecting public safety. For example, some residents already get isolated and cut off from emergency services during floods. Power outages and basement flooding have become increasingly frequent problems. Rising seas will cause more extensive coastal flooding and damage, beach erosion and loss, and migration or loss of salt marshes, which provide important wildlife habitat as well as a buffer during storms. Rising seas also cause groundwater levels to rise. Groundwater rise has the potential to damage roads, septic systems, and other underground infrastructure, impact drinking water resources, and cause wetland expansion. Groundwater rise is projected to extend up to 3 miles inland from the coast. Other climate impacts will also affect inland areas of Northampton. For example, more extreme precipitation and freshwater flooding, extreme heat and drought, and impacts on natural resources like shifting species and more invasives. These impacts will affect the community as a whole. And zooming further out, it's also important to consider the regional impacts, such as looking at potential issues with evacuation routes during storms, like Route 1A, which runs through several coastal towns. Northampton and Little Boar's Head are already taking action to address these impacts and plan for the future. In 2015, the town completed a vulnerability assessment called Tides to Storms, looking at where built infrastructure and natural resources are most vulnerable to impacts from sea level rise and storm surge, and developing recommendations to address these vulnerabilities. A few key findings include that 139 parcels are impacted by 1.7 feet of sea level rise, and this exceeds 200 parcels when you add storm surge on top of that. 1.3 miles of roadway and 5 culverts are impacted by this same scenario. In 2018, Northampton's Hazard Mitigation Plan was updated to incorporate information from the Tides to Storms project. This plan identifies that the probability of coastal flooding is high. Improvements were also made to the zoning ordinances to expand floodplain protection. Other relevant work includes the Little River Salt Marsh Restoration Project, which began in the early 1990s, and the Philbrook Pond Study from 2018, along with recently funded restoration work that will begin in 2021. Northampton has also been a leader in land protection. By protecting natural resources, the community is conserving the flood storage benefits of wetlands and streamside buffers, as well as wildlife habitat, which will be increasingly important in a changing climate. In addition to these efforts, there are other available resources that the town can tap into to support climate-ready decision-making, such as the New Hampshire Coastal Flood Risk Summary, Science and Guidance documents, which provide the latest local science on rising sea levels, groundwater rise, storms, and precipitation. The Conservation Priorities for the Protection of Water Resources maps from the Nature Conservancy, New Hampshire, which identifies salt marsh migration opportunity areas, flood storage areas, and buffer protection priorities. And the Tidal Crossing Assessment, completed by the New Hampshire DES Coastal Program in 2018, which evaluated the condition, tidal restriction, and flood risk of 8 tidal crossings in Northampton. Northampton and Little Boar's Head have done good work with these existing efforts, and they recognize that there's more to be done, which is why they're currently working on 2 climate adaptation master plan chapters, one for Little Boar's Head and one for the town. These chapters will help to bring together recommendations from the separate studies and projects in one place so they're more useful for planning, incorporate new and recent data, provide a foundation for future zoning ordinance updates, and most importantly, identify and prioritize future actions that could be taken to protect Northampton and Little Boar's Head in the face of a changing climate. Find more information, including opportunities for public input on the master plan chapters, at this link, www.publicinput.com/climate-ready-nhampton-lbh.